I Good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Sunday. All right. I hope everybody's morning is going okay so far. Hey, Miss Shirley. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, E. Brooks. If y'all still in the building. Hey, Leah. Hey, Duchess. Hey, Miss Margie. Welcome. Y'all put a one in the chat if y'all can hear me good. If the sound is good, please put a one in the chat so we can get started, y'all. All right, Chef, you in the bushes. Okay. Thank you, E. Brooks. Thank you. Okay, y'all, we into day 6, okay? Thank you, Miss Shirley. Thank y'all for coming. Y'all, please make sure y'all hit that like button if you don't mind. So now we're into day 6, y'all. We're starting day 6. So I want to get through as much as possible before I have to get off of here. So let's get it started. Let me see. Let me take this banner down. All right, we got a new witness being sworn in. I think he's a, hey, Miss Janice. I think he's a Walmart worker, y'all. So let's get into it.
The truth. I do.
Please state your name for the record and spell both your first and your last name.
Matthew Gehant, Mattghehant.
What is your occupation?
I'm a asset protection area manager for Walmart supply chain.
How long have you been employed with Walmart?
Going on 19 years.
What do your responsibilities entail?
Currently, my responsibilities center around safety and compliance for the facility.
Okay. And then what specific location do you work out of?
It's Sterling, Illinois, DC 7024.
Back in July of 2020, what was the store that you were assigned to?
I was working at the Clinton, Iowa Walmart Supercenter, store 2889.
And then what was the nature of your position with the store at that time?
I was an asset protection manager. Main focus there was centered around security and preventing criminal activity, a little bit of safety, a little bit of compliance.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to the Walmart store there in Clinton. Where is that store located relative to Highway 30? And then when you come into town, where it transitions into Lincoln Way?
So it'd be just north of Lincoln Way and then off of South 25th Street.
All right. Does the parking lot of the business actually run along Lincoln Way on one side? And would that be to the south?
The parking lot would be on the north side of Lincoln Way. And then there's a frontage road with a gas station in between.
Oh, absolutely. All right. That being said, could you describe for us the store itself? Does it have any video surveillance cameras affixed to it?
Yes, it does.
Where are video surveillance cameras affixed to the business?
We have several on the rooftops, several inside the facility, and then we have some that are actually built into the doorways of the facility, the entrance and the exit.
Okay. And then within the store itself, are there video surveillance cameras?
Yes.
What would be the positioning of video surveillance cameras throughout the store? And if you could speak specifically to the cash registers, I would appreciate that as well.
Yeah, so the cameras vary based off the store needs, but every point of sale, which would be every register in the facility, does have a camera dedicated to that specific register.
In the Walmart store at Clinton, if customers are checking out, are there checkout areas that are self-service?
That's correct.
And in those areas, are there surveillance cameras affixed to the registers that customers could use to check themselves out?
Yes, there are.
All right. Now, the other topic that I'd like to discuss, for the video surveillance cameras outside the store, would they pick up any activity in the parking lot?
Yes, they would.
Do they also pick up activity of individuals approaching the store and entering the store?
Yes.
And then once the subject enters the store, can you basically determine that individual's movement throughout the store up to the point of checkout and departure?
That's correct.
I want to direct your attention to July 11th of 2020. Were you contacted by law enforcement officers of the Davenport Police Department?
Yes.
And what was the nature of that contact?
They basically just gave me a time frame, vehicle description, subject description, wanted to know if I had any video. They actually met me up at the store there, and we went to the security office where we reviewed video for those time frames.
Okay. As you sit on the stand today, do you recall the description for a vehicle of interest?
I recall it was a sedan. I don't remember the exact color or make or model.
Certainly. And then as far as the description for the subject of interest, do you recall that today?
Good morning, Juicy Kim. Good morning, Heathen. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you recall about the subject of interest as far as physical descriptors?
I was a fairly large black male, described to be somewhat medium height, but fairly largely built.
All right, and then beyond that, were you aware that law enforcement was investigating a report of a missing child that had occurred on July 10th of 2020 in Davenport, Iowa?
Yeah, once we started reviewing the video, that's where we started kind of discuss the specifics of what we were actually looking for and why we were looking for it.
Okay, was July 10th then the date of focus?
Correct.
All right, and then did law enforcement indicate to you that they actually had a time that they wanted to focus on based on a pinging of a cell phone associated with the subject of interest?
Yeah, they didn't share a whole lot of specifics for the reason why the time frame, but they did have a pretty narrow time frame that they wanted to look at.
Okay, and what would be that time frame as it relates to the time the store opens up?
So I believe it was approximately between 6:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. was the time frame I was given. That was kind of right during the time of COVID, so our store actually changed its hours during that time frame, and we didn't open until 7 a.m. We're generally a 24-hour facility prior to that.
All right. Did you have an opportunity to sit with the officer who came and reviewed video surveillance camera for the time frame of 6:30 to 7 a.m. on July 10th of 2020?
Yes.
Did the officer then identify a subject of interest and a transaction that he observed taking place at one of the checkout stands?
Yes.
Were you requested to obtain the receipt for that transaction?
Yes.
And then how is it that you're able to identify what receipt would belong to the purchase made by that subject of interest?
So basically, you would just match up the time frame for that specific camera. So I recall it was a self-checkout camera, so I'd find that register number, reference that to the camera system, and then reference that to our electronic journal. Our electronic journal is where all of our store receipts are tracked digitally, electronically. And then basically you would match up the timestamp associated with that camera shot versus what the journal was showing, and that would provide the receipt. You would also match up the items that are being purchased and compare them to what you're seeing on the electronic journal.
As you watched the video surveillance footage, could you see what items the subject was purchasing?
Yes.
And what items was the subject purchasing?
It was 2 bottles of bleach.
Okay. Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm showing counsel what's been marked as State's Exhibit 87. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm handing you what's been marked as State 687 for purposes of identification. I'd like for you to look at that exhibit and tell me if you recognize that exhibit.
Yeah, that'd be the copy that I provided to the police department.
Okay. Is that the receipt for the subject of interest that purchased those 2 bottles of Clorox?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit 87 into the record.
Exhibit 87 is admitted.
Mr. Gahant, and I'm saying your name incorrectly. Can you pronounce that for me?
It's Jahant.
Jahant, there we go. Mr. Jahant, can you tell us what the date is on State's Exhibit 87?
It'd be July 10th of 2020.
What was the time of the purchase?
It'd be 7:08 a.m.
And then what are the items documented as being purchased?
So it's 2 bottles of bleach, 81 ounce, same SKU, $4.42 at retail.
Okay. And how did the subject of interest pay for those 2 81-ounce bottles of bleach?
I paid with cash.
Did that conclude your involvement in this matter? And actually, let me just rephrase that question. Were you also involved in turning over copies of the activity that was observed on video surveillance cameras, both outside and inside the store?
That's correct.
And was that associated with this subject of interest and the vehicle of interest?
Yes.
Did that conclude your involvement in this matter?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions of this witness.
Mr. Freeze?
Sir, the time at 7:08 a.m., that's the time the transaction actually occurred?
Yeah, so that time actually generates from the second that that receipt prints. That's the timestamp that it puts on it.
Okay. So we can assume that that's the time the gentleman who purchased these items was leaving the store, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you said this is Clorox bleach. Do you know that?
I don't recall. It looks like it's Clorox by the description, but I don't know the exact brand.
Okay. And we know this is from your store because it says ST number 2889 in the upper left-hand corner.
That's correct.
And that's the store identifier?
Yes.
That's all I have.
I have no further questions, John.
You may step down. Thank you.
The state would call Monique Brillhart.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Monique Brillhart. My first name is spelled Monique. My last name is spelled Brillhart.
And how are you currently employed?
I'm employed by the FBI Laboratory Latent Print Operations Unit.
How long have you worked for the FBI laboratory?
I have worked for the FBI Laboratory for 19 years.
And have you always worked in the latent print department?
Yes.
What are your duties in the latent print department?
Receive items of evidence for the detection and development of latent prints. Any latent prints that I am able to detect or develop, I will then compare to the known prints of individuals that are either submitted by a contributing agency or obtained through the FBI's fingerprint database.
Can you describe your educational background and the training that you've received in order to hold your position?
I received a Bachelor of Science degree in biology with a concentration in criminalistics from York College of Pennsylvania, which is located in York, Pennsylvania. I also received a Master's of Science degree in biotechnology with a concentration in weapons of mass destruction from the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland.
And from there, once you began your employment with the FBI, did you engage in any further training specific to latent fingerprints?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe that for us?
So my training at the FBI Laboratory consisted of approximately a 2-year training program, and that training program consisted of classroom lectures, examinations, both written tests, comparison examinations, comparison exercises, oral boards, presentations, and moot courts. And at the completion of my training, I successfully passed a full comprehensive qualification examination.
Do you have to engage in any sort of continuing education or ongoing training in order to hold your position as well?
Yes.
And what does that entail?
So each year we are required to participate in a certain number of hours of continuing education in our discipline. And additionally, in addition to that, I also am required to successfully pass a proficiency examination every year.
And have you passed every year?
Yes.
Ms. Brillhart, what are latent fingerprints?
So on the palmar surfaces of your hand, as well as the soles of your feet, there are raised portions of skin known as friction ridges. And those friction ridges exude sweat. So when you touch an item, you may leave an impression of that friction ridge arrangement on the item. Many times, latent prints are not visible to the naked eye. So they require different light sources, chemicals, or fingerprint powders to be able to visualize them.
So when you are provided an item in your lab with the goal of trying to see if there's any sort of latent fingerprints or friction ridges on that item, how do you begin examining it?
So the first thing that I consider is what kind of item is it? For example, is it a porous item such as paper? So paper is a porous item in which the sweat that may be present on the friction ridges would soak into the item. Or is it a non-porous item, such as something that is smooth, like plastic or glass, in which the friction ridges would be essentially on top of the item? That will then be the driving force of determining what different chemical methods that I will use to then develop latent prints.
And how does the process differ based on whether it's a porous item versus a non-porous item?
So for example, if I have a piece of paper, I will start with just a general visual examination, followed up by various light sources, such as a laser light, looking for any latent prints that may inherently fluoresce. Some latent prints are able to do that based on the composition of the sweat. Following that, I will use a chemical known as indanedione, which is used on paper, and then following that up with a process known as physical developer. Now, how that differs from non-porous items in that with a non-porous item, I still do a visual examination with oblique lighting, looking for any latent prints that might be detected. Then a light source, such as a laser light. The difference here now is I will use superglue fuming, in which I will place the item into a superglue fuming chamber. I will use liquid superglue, burn the superglue to create essentially a smoke that adheres to any moisture on the item, such as latent print residue. And at the completion of superglue fuming, I apply a dye stain, which allows me to visualize any latent prints that are coated with that dye stain under the laser light.
Based on your training and experience, are there certain latent fingerprints on versus other items?
It just depends. It's no there's no real number to that or anything, but in general terms, paper, because when you touch a piece of paper and the residue is able to soak directly into the paper and you cannot rub the latent print off because it's inside the paper itself, as opposed to something that is non-porous, in which when you touch the item, the friction ridges are on top of the item. They are more easily damaged in general terms, just because of the nature of those types of items.
So I understand a porous item seems to absorb the fingerprint. It would potentially maintain it maybe a little better than a non-porous item where that the friction ridges just kind of sit on top.
Correct.
Which would make it easier to be damaged or wiped away or something along those lines.
Yes.
Good morning, Siri. Thanks for joining.
Now, once you have an item and you've gone through your process of trying to see if there are any fingerprints, latent fingerprints on that item, if you do make some sort of identification, does that necessarily mean that that print or whatever it is that you have found would be usable for later identifications?
So as I'm processing items of evidence, if I do detect friction ridge development, I will there is enough quality and quantity of information within that latent print to then drive it to the next step, which would move into a comparison stage to a particular individual.
What type of quality or quantity is required in order to then compare to a known latent fingerprint?
So every latent print is different. Essentially, as I am conducting my examination of any latent prints that are detected, I start with an analysis step where essentially I am looking at the overall ridge flow of that latent print, determining if it's clear enough, if there are enough features within that latent print where I would feel as though I would be able to essentially make an identification decision at the end of my examination. So it's very case dependent, latent print to latent print, but essentially it is looking at all the information contained in that latent print to determine whether or not I would be able to compare to an individual and ultimately reach an identification decision.
Is there a difference between locating some friction ridge detail and determining that it's just not suitable for comparison versus not finding anything at all?
Yes, that does occur. There are times in which I will examine items of evidence and I will see no friction ridge development whatsoever. And there are times in which I will see some friction ridge development. It may or may not be able to be used, to the other spectrum of, yes, there is enough information that it can drive to the comparison step and ultimately would be able to be identified to a particular individual.
In situations where you are presented with an object, would you expect to find friction ridge detail every single time?
No, I would not.
Why not?
There are many factors involved in touching an item and not leaving a latent print behind. For example, the weather outside. If it's very cold outside, your friction ridges tend not to want to produce sweat and produce that sweat on the friction ridges of the finger. So when you touch an item, you may not leave that impression. Whereas if it's really hot outside, alternatively, you may be sweating a lot, you may touch the item, but it may smear a lot if it's like on a non-porous item. There are conditions outside weather, if it rained on a particular item of evidence, if someone were wearing gloves, I talked about non-porous items in which the latent prints are actually on top of the item. It's very easy to damage those by wiping them away because the friction ridges are setting on top. There can also be factors involved with just the skin condition of an individual. When we are younger, our friction ridges tend to be more plump. It allows the friction ridges to come in contact a little more easy with an item as opposed to as it's the normal aging process, which can prevent some of that contact as well. Also an occupation of an individual, if someone is using their hands a lot, maybe a bricklayer, for example, they may wear down those ridges, which could make that a little more difficult to leave a latent print. So there are various environmental factors that can occur with leaving latent prints.
Now, you did mention if somebody has wiped down an item, that could potentially affect your ability to find any latent prints. Would, along those same lines, cleaning or using bleach or some sort of cleaner like that also affect your ability to find latent prints?
Yes, especially with the non-porous items, being that the latent print is on top of the item, that would have an effect.
When you are to do any sort of testing to see if an item has been cleaned prior to that item being presented to you?
No.
Do you have the ability to test any specific items to see if bleach has been used on that item?
No, I do not.
Once you have completed your examination on a specific item and you do find that there are usable latent fingerprints, how would you then compare that item to a known latent fingerprint?
So after I determine, based on my full analysis of a latent print, that there is enough information contained within that latent print to move to the comparison step, I will then determine if an individual, if I was asked to compare an actual individual to any latent prints in that submission. And if I am, then I will retrieve that known card if I am able from our fingerprint database. It's a repository of fingerprints. If I am not presented with an individual to compare, I would then search that into our fingerprint database in an attempt to make an identification.
And so once you are able to determine, or if you are provided with that known fingerprint, what's your process for comparing the known with what you found on an item?
And that I'm able to do that comparison.
I think today's serious. Is the day your birthday? Is the day your birthday serious? Let me know real fast. I think it is. Happy birthday, sis. People said that Sunday was your actual birthday. Let us know. So we can wish you a happy birthday, boo. I just don't want nobody to think I'm ignoring them. I can't see the comments because I look like looking at the full screen on my phone. Oh, no problem, Miss Shirley. Happy birthday, Sirius. May God bless you with many, many more, sweetie. Happy birthday. Hope you enjoyed your weekend.
Then set the latent print and the known print side by side. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the same general ridge flow of the friction ridges of that print. I am also looking for particular levels of detail within the print that I examined and I determined during my analysis step, such as a dividing ridge, which is a ridge that continues and then divides like a fork in a road, or an ending ridge, which is a ridge that continues and then stops, or a dot, which is a ridge that is as wide as it is thick. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for those characteristics that I observed during my analysis in the latent print. I'm looking for the same characteristic of the same type, the same location, and the same spatial location and direction within the known print to determine whether or not those two prints are sharing the same features. So essentially, if you think of a constellation in the sky like the Big Dipper, I'm looking for those features in that same spatial arrangement. As I continue on with my comparison, at the end of my comparison, I then make a determination whether or not this is an identification, meaning that I am finding strong support for these features in agreement, or an exclusion decision where I'm finding strong support for the features not in agreement, or an inconclusive in which I am unable to determine based on the information that I am presented.
And I apologize if you've already said this, but does every individual or if you do find an
Good morning,
inclusive
Reggie. Thanks for joining us.
fingerprint, are you able to then say that fingerprint is most likely belonging to this person on this item?
If I am able to find enough information in agreement, it will drive strong support for an identification, meaning that that would be that individual's fingerprint, yes.
Now, regarding this particular case, were you provided certain items to examine?
Yes,
And were you provided those items sometime in between July and August 14th of 2020?
yes,
And is it common practice for you to author a report of your findings?
yes, it is.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked here as State's Exhibit 48. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 48?
This is my official latent print report.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of the report you've authored regarding your findings of the items provided to you for this particular incident? 48 into evidence?
No objection.
Exhibit 48 is admitted.
May I publish? Your
Good
Honor?
morning, TK. Thanks for joining us, sweetie.
Sorry. Okay. Showing you then page 1 of State's Exhibit 48. I think there's a way to zoom here. Okay, so just starting here at the top, there appears to be a lab number at the top of this report. Is that the lab number that the FBI lab would have assigned to this case?
Yes,
There is also a date here listed of July 22nd, 2020. What is that date in reference to?
the communication date refers to the laboratory examine request, the laboratory examination request from the field office.
And then, see, shifting over, I have to zoom out. At the top of the report here, there's a date of August 14th, 2020. What is that date in reference to?
That date is in reference to the date I
Have a blessed day, Sirius. Hope you enjoy your lunch, girl, and your day. We'll see you later.
authored the report.
So listed out here under the FBI
Good
laboratory
morning,
evidence
Thanks for joining,
designators,
beautiful.
what are all those items that we see listed?
All the items listed are what I received for latent print examinations.
Now, all of those items have been
Assigned at the FBI laboratory. As items of evidence come in for a submission, we will then assign the number sequentially in that particular case.
So just for example, looking first at item number 19, there appears to then be a description of that item. Where did that description come from?
That description is actually determined by our evidence management unit as they inventory items of evidence that come into the laboratory. That would come from the field office or whoever our contributor was. Those particular descriptions, though, are determined by our evidence management unit.
Item to you?
Yes.
So then next to the description in the parentheses, there appears to be several series of numbers. What is that?
So a 1B number and then the E number, which is a barcode, those are very specific numbers for field offices in regards to their evidence that they are submitting.
So my understanding then is, so just looking at the top item there, item 19, that would be the lab number for the hatchet from the trunk of the 2007 Chevy Impala. But the number right next to that, the 1B2, that would be the field office identification number for that item.
That is correct. They use that as a tracking mechanism.
So and then looking at all of these items, can you just go through each of the items that you would have tested and what the results were?
Sure. So item 19 is a hatchet from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala. I did not develop any latent prints on this item. Item 19-1, blade cover from item 19. I did not develop any latent prints on this item. Item 47, machete from on top of microwave at 743 Schmidt Road. I did not develop latent prints on this item. Item 48, machete. I did not develop latent prints on this item. Item 48-1, sheath with item 48. I did not develop latent prints on this item. Item 49, broom from kitchen at 2744 East 53rd Street, number 8. I did develop one latent impression on this item. Item 52, bottle with cap and liquid contents from 2744 East 53rd Street. I did not develop latent prints on this item.
So item 48, what you have listed here as a machete for the FBI evidence item 1B58, though it might not be very clear, did that appear to be this blue and black machete, if you recall?
I don't recall.
And then item number 52, bottle cap with liquid contents from 2744 East 53rd Street. Do you recall if that would have been a container of bleach?
I do not recall.
Okay. In any event, the only item in which you were able to develop a usable latent fingerprint was the item 49, the broom, located at 2744 East 53rd Street.
Correct.
Now, all of the items that were listed here, would you consider these items to be the porous items, the type that absorb fingerprints, or non-porous, the type where the prints are more easily damaged?
These are non-porous items in which the print is on top of the item.
And when you said that, or testified here, that you were not able to identify any usable prints, does that mean, or from your recollection, that you didn't see any prints at all for these items, or were there things that you found, they just were not usable?
I think what I do recall is that I didn't see any friction ridge development on any of the items except for the broom, in which I did develop an actual latent impression on that item.
So with the exception of item 49, you did not observe any friction ridge detail on any of the other items that were provided to you?
Correct, just item 49.
Were you provided a known latent print for comparison in this case?
Do you mean a known fingerprint card for an individual?
Yes.
I was provided with a person of interest with a FBI number identifier, which allows me to then pull any known records if needed for comparison.
And in this particular case, was the individual you would have compared a known record to identified as Henry Dinkins?
Yes.
So turning then to page 2 of your report, specifically then for item number 49, were you able to compare that your usable latent fingerprint to the known record for Henry Dinkins?
Yes.
And what were the results of that comparison?
Mr. Dinkins was excluded from the latent impression that was detected on item 49.
So again, and going back to those other items that you had attempted to locate any sort of usable friction ridge detail, again, were those the types of items that, because of their non-porous nature, it just may be more difficult for you to locate those any usable prints?
Yes, because the latent prints that are on non-porous items, they tend to be more fragile just because they are setting on top of the surface. So it is easy to damage those latent prints.
And if somebody had wiped those items down or cleaned those items, that would have also affected your ability to find any prints on those items?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Freeze?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Ms. Brillhart, you were brought here from the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, right?
Yes.
And just so I can summarize, you were able to get one print off this kitchen broom, correct?
Yes.
And that print excluded Mr. Dinkins, right?
Yes.
So to summarize your testimony, tell us that the one print you were able to examine excluded Mr. Dinkins, right?
I think so. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, you were able to examine one print and compare it, right?
Yes.
And that one print excluded Mr. Dinkins, correct?
Yes.
And you were asked to try to find latent prints on a hatchet, correct?
Yes.
And the blade cover from that hatchet, correct?
Yes.
And 2 machetes, correct?
Yes.
And a sheath from one of the machetes, correct?
Yes.
And there were no prints on those.
That is correct.
So you came here from Quantico, Virginia to tell us there was no prints on any of this stuff for Henry Dinkins.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. O'Donnell?
Nothing based on that, Your Honor.
If that prosecutor ain't an asshole, I ain't have my 3 kids. Man, he said so. You came all the way from Quantico to tell us there's no prints? I'm like, boy. Ooh, okay, y'all.
You may second. Ms. Cunningham, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls FBI analyst Linda Otterstatter.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat.
I think so. Thank you.
You may proceed, Ms. Cunningham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name for the record and spell both your first and your last name.
My name is Linda Otterstatter, spelled LindaOtterstatter.
What is your occupation?
I am a physical scientist, forensic examiner with the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia.
How long have you been employed with the FBI?
Yeah, man.
Approximately 17 years.
Could you describe your prior educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Syracuse University in Syracuse, New York. I've also taken chemistry coursework from Colorado State University, as well as criminalistics coursework from the Metropolitan State College of Denver, Colorado.
When did you complete your formal education?
I received my Bachelor of Science degree from Syracuse University in 1996.
All right. And then once you completed your formal education, is that when your career with the FBI commenced? Or did
No.
you have prior employment experience?
Before working for the FBI, I was a trace evidence forensic scientist for the Wyoming State Crime Lab in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
And then what type of work did you do for the Wyoming State Crime Lab?
I was a trace evidence examiner specializing in hairs, fibers, fabric, and cordage evidence. I also was responsible for the
You employed as an analyst for Wyoming State Crime Lab.
6 years.
Okay. And then so in total, how much experience do you have in this field?
Between Wyoming and the FBI, a total of approximately 23 years.
Can you describe the specialized training that you've received related to the scientific field that you work in?
I successfully completed the FBI laboratory examiner training program under the direction and instruction of examiners that are qualified in the field. This entailed hair, fiber, fabric, and cordage examinations, our tests, supervised casework, oral board examination, and competency tests. I also completed a similar training program at the Wyoming State Crime Laboratory.
Okay. And then do you go through regular training throughout the course of your career?
Yes, I do. I've completed numerous 3 years.
Okay. All right, Ms. Otterstatter, do you have a PowerPoint that we're going to present, which helps us understand the nature of the work that you do there at the FBI laboratory?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm showing counsel what's marked the State's Exhibit number 47. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm handing you what's marked the State's Exhibit 47 for purposes of identification. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 47?
Yes, I do.
Why do you recognize this exhibit?
I recognize it because it is the PowerPoint presentation I created by examining the slides.
Your Honor, at this time, the State would move to introduce State's Exhibit number 47.
No objection.
Exhibit 47 is admitted.
May I publish this exhibit as we go through her expert testimony, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. Now, directing your attention to page 1 of this exhibit, very simply, what do we see here?
This was the title slide saying that it's FBI Laboratory Trace Evidence Unit presentation, and I work in the hair and fiber group.
Okay, and then I'm going to bring this down a little bit so we have the ability to see everything. Going to page 2, do you define for us what trace evidence is?
Yes,
What is trace evidence?
trace evidence can be defined as debris that is small in size that can be transferred from one location to another.
All right. And then why are trace examinations conducted?
The reason why trace evidence examinations are conducted is based upon Locard's principle of exchange, which states that when two people or a person and an object come into contact, trace evidence such as hairs and fibers may be exchanged.
Okay.
So by examining hairs and fibers collected from items of evidence, it can be determined whether or not a possible association exists between those two people or person and an object.
Now, you use the language that there may be an exchange. Is that an absolute if individuals come into contact with one another?
There could be a transfer. It is possible that there may not be a transfer of hairs and fibers.
Okay, and then when we talk about hairs and fibers, just given the nature of hairs and fibers, is that something that, say, for example, it transfers to a surface that it can easily fall away from that surface?
Yes, that is possible.
Give us examples of what type of activity could cause a hair or fiber to fall away from a surface.
Well, I can't say, I can't give definite, but I suppose that if my hair, for instance, as I'm sitting here, fell off and fell onto the desk here, me getting up and brushing against it, or if there's air conditioning or whatever, that it could possibly fall off that surface and onto the floor.
Okay, going to page 4, do you explain for us then what trace evidence you deal with there within your unit?
This is some examples of trace evidence that we examine in the hair and fiber group. Examples can include hairs, fibers, fabric, and cordage evidence.
Okay, let's speak about cordage. What do you mean by cordage?
Cordage is a collective term used to refer to such items as rope and twine, for example.
All right. Now on page 5, how are examinations conducted relative to hair?
Well, today's presentation will be focusing on hairs and fibers. So I'll start by defining what a hair is. And a hair is a slender thread-like outgrowth from the skin of mammals.
Okay. Where's my glasses? Maybe I put those back up. And then when we talk about a hair itself, what is a hair constructed of?
So pictured here on slide 5 is a cross-sectional diagram of a hair shaft, which illustrates 3 anatomical regions that comprise the hair. That consists of the cuticle, which is the outer layer of the hair, comprised of overlapping scales, sort of like shingles on a roof. The main body of the hair is the cortex, which contains such things as the pigment granules, and the medulla is the central core of cells running through the center of the hair shaft.
Going to our next slide. How are hair examinations conducted?
The way hair examinations are conducted can be described in a series of steps as listed here. The first step being processing, which involves the collection of trace evidence from items of evidence. The next step involves the identification and characterization of hairs, followed by high magnification comparison microscopy, and followed by preparation of DNA analysis as appropriate. And this is just a summary, so there's additional slides coming up just describing these a little bit more.
Each of those steps? Thank you for that. All right, now, as we go to page 7 then, are you going to provide for us essentially an explanation as to how you would process items of evidence for hairs or fibers?
Yeah, items of evidence in the laboratory are examined in specialized processing rooms within the trace evidence unit at the FBI laboratory. Rooms are thoroughly cleaned prior to use. Items from the victim, suspect, and crime scene are processed in different rooms or on different dates to avoid cross-contamination. And protective clothing such as gloves, hair nets, and lab coats are used and also changed prior to processing items from different individuals or scenes.
In page 8, can you describe the various processing techniques that exist for purposes of collecting these items and being able to analyze them?
There are various methods employed that hairs and fibers can be collected using. Pictured in the upper left-hand corner is tape lifting. In the upper right-hand corner is vacuuming, where a specialized vacuum filter is used to collect hairs and fibers. In the bottom right-hand corner, there is what's called scraping, and this is showing, let's take a shirt, for example. If a shirt is an item of evidence, it is hung on a bar over clean brown paper, and a metal spatula is used to gently scrape the shirt, pictured here, and dislodge any foreign hairs and fibers from that item onto the clean brown paper.
Let me just take that a step further if I could. Does the item come into the laboratory? And let's use a shirt, for example, since that's what we're seeing here in your PowerPoint. Do you receive that shirt and then you go through the process of trying to locate potential hairs or fibers?
Yes.
Okay, so that doesn't happen out in the field. It's simply coming to you to determine whether or not there's a hair or fiber present.
In general, that is our procedure to collect it ourselves. There are times where there may be trace evidence that's collected from an item that is packaged separately, but in general, that's how we process.
Okay. Let me throw an example out. During the course of the investigation in this particular matter, there was a vehicle of interest, an RV, and between the top foam mat and the bottom foam mat, there were like, for example, a long piece of hair. Would that be an instance where field agents then would collect that hair or fiber and then package that up for purposes of examination?
That is a possible way that they could do it, yes.
Okay. But in most instances, it's an article that's coming in that you are going to process to see if you can identify whether or not there are hair or fibers present?
Yes.
All right. Because an article is submitted to the laboratory for you to process for hair or fibers, does that necessarily mean that the field agent has observed that, or are they simply taking articles and sending them in and asking you to go through your process to try and identify or locate something that could potentially identify involved parties?
Yes, they will collect the item, and then we will determine whether or not that there's hairs and fibers that were found on that, because we use specialized equipment such as microscopes to do so, and sometimes with hairs and fibers, they're barely visible to the unaided eye.
Absolutely. Going to page 9 then. Walk us through processing and what that consists of.
On the previous slide, after scraping, there was a technique called picking, and that's where using a stereo microscope, which is a low magnification microscope, foreign debris such as hairs and fibers are collected directly from the item of evidence. So once the hairs and fibers are collected, then using a stereo microscope, those potential hairs and fibers are prepared on glass microscope slides for microscopic examination purposes.
And then once it's on the slide, you put it under the microscope and view it utilizing the microscope?
Yes.
Going to page 10 of our PowerPoint presentation, are there different types of hairs?
Yes, so the next step is the characterization of hairs, and this is done with a high magnification microscope. It's specifically a high magnification transmitted light microscope that is used to examine and characterize hairs based upon their microscopic characteristics. And even backing up, it's at that point where I examine the slide to determine if it is a hair or if it's a fiber at that point.
Okay. When you talk about hairs and the characterization of such, can you make a distinction between what would be a human hair versus an animal hair?
Yes.
Okay. And then even beyond that, and I'll just throw this question out, based on the ethnic background of an individual, when you look at hairs, can you determine a potential ethnic background to that individual?
Yes, the ancestral characteristics are determined at that point too, and I have a slide coming up about that.
Thank you. Going to page 11 of the PowerPoint presentation. Now walk us through this, how you determine whether or not you're dealing with a human or a non-human animal hair.
So it can be determined using a high magnification transmitted light microscope if the hair is human or non-human animal hair. If it is an animal hair, what type of animal can be determined, such as a dog or a cat, for example, as pictured at the top of those photos. If it is a human hair, then further characterization can be conducted.
Okay. As we look at the examples on page 11 of your PowerPoint, does it just give us an idea of how distinctly different a human hair is from various animals?
Yes, pictured in the upper left-hand corner is a human hair, and there's a dog hair which looks microscopically different than cat hair versus a deer hair, for example. All the characteristics in those different 3 anatomical regions of the hair have different characteristics for characterization.
And then when you were talking about the 3 anatomical characteristics of a hair, was that what we had discussed earlier when we talked about the outside of the hair, what would run through the middle of the hair, and then basically the center structure?
Yes.
Going to page 12 of the PowerPoint, does this pick up on the question that I asked about determining the ancestry of a human hair?
Yes, hairs can exhibit characteristics of African ancestry, Asian or Native American ancestry, or European ancestry, and hairs can exhibit characteristics of multiple ancestral groups as well.
Okay, let's use a hair that has an African ancestry versus a hair that has a European ancestry. What would be the difference between the two?
Well, there are many differences, and all of those characteristics together can identify a hair as European or African. Those differences can be, for example, a African ancestry characteristic hair is usually finer and flatter, sort of like a ribbon. And that is why in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that if you look at, look at one hair, it looks like it varies in diameter. That's the flat shape. In addition to the cross-sectional shape, there's also the pigment granules are usually more dense and have more of a clumped appearance, where European ancestry hair is a little bit coarser. It's more oval, and the pigment is more of an even arrangement.
All right. Now, let's discuss the different types of hair that you would examine based on where they are located on the human body.
The body region the hair may have come from can also be determined by a microscopic hair exam. This can include head hairs, which refer to hairs from the scalp, pubic hair, facial hair such as beard or mustache, body hairs, which include eyebrows, eyelashes, limb hairs from the arms and legs, chest, axillary or underarm hair, nose, and ear hair.
Explain what would be the difference between a hair from an individual's head versus a hair from the pubic region.
A head hair and a pubic hair can vary in their microscopic characteristics. Here is a good picture of a pubic hair on the right-hand side, where it shows a buckle, which is that change in diameter, as you see kind of sent in that middle picture, where a head hair tends not to have the buckling. There's also, pubic hair is usually coarser in general than hairs. The root of the neck of the root can appear thicker. So it's all the characteristics together that decision is made.
Okay, and would that be true for hairs on any area of the body, that they're going to have slightly different characteristics?
Yes.
Okay, do you set forth yet another example on this particular portion of your PowerPoint related to a facial hair so that we can see the difference in the appearance between a head hair, a pubic hair, and a facial hair?
This picture in the lower right-hand corner is a picture of a beard or mustache hair, referred to as a facial hair. And yeah, that looks different. That shows, if you can see, there's a difference in color, kind of approximately a half to a third. That shows that facial hair is actually triangular in shape.
Okay.
So that shows the difference in diameter.
Okay. If there is a hair that is located, does that necessarily mean that it's suitable for microscopic comparison purposes?
Hairs can be suitable and non-suitable for comparison purposes. That is the next step in the microscopic examination procedure. Hairs that are suitable for meaningful microscopic comparison purposes include head hairs and pubic hairs with sufficient microscopic characteristics.
And then let me stop you there. If you could define what is required for there to be sufficient microscopic characteristics, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for all of the characteristics present in the 3 anatomical regions of the hair. I also need to make sure to make the determination whether or not it is a head hair or a pubic hair, because head hairs and pubic hairs can be from the same person, but they're going to look different.
Certainly.
So hairs that are not suitable for meaningful microscopic comparison purposes include non-head hairs and pubic hairs, such other areas of the body, such as arms, legs, axillary, and eye hair, for example. Also, hair fragments or like bits and pieces of hairs, which are often found. They are also not suitable for comparison purposes.
Okay. And then have you given examples of hair fragments that are missing characteristics that make it unsuitable for comparison?
Right. An example would be short hairs with no root and insufficient characteristics to determine the body region.
So as we discuss this topic, do I understand correctly that really the hairs that are needed for purposes of making some type of microscopic comparison would be from an individual's head or their pubic hair?
Correct.
Going to page 15 of the PowerPoint presentation. How do you do the microscopic hair comparison?
So if a hair is suitable for microscopic comparison purposes, the next step is the use of a high magnification comparison microscope, which allows for a direct side-by-side examination of the question hair and the known hair sample.
Okay, go ahead, finish that out, and I've got a question I want to ask you.
So there is a question hair that is mounted on a microscope slide, which is separate from a known hair sample mounted on separate and different microscope slides, and they can be placed under under the microscope, the comparison microscope, which pictured on the slide is two transmitted light microscopes connected by an optical bridge. So I am able to look through the eyepiece and see two separate samples under one field of view, sort of like a split screen TV.
Having said that, then, if there is a hair that's been recovered in the course of an investigation, will law enforcement then need to collect a known hair sample either from a subject of interest or even from what would be a victim?
Yes.
Okay, and so is that what you mean by known hair samples?
Yes.
And
That's
then once you
correct.
have those known hair samples, it's collected to those items of evidence that maybe you have been able to develop through your various processing. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now take us to the next step.
So the microscopic comparison must be conducted with hairs from the same body area. For example, a question hair has to be compared to a known head hair sample.
All right.
And corresponding portions or regions of the hair between the question and the known are compared. So I'm comparing from root to the corresponding root all the way up from tip to tip.
Okay. Now, as we look at this particular portion of your slideshow on page 15, that lower photograph, is that giving us the ability to see what you are seeing when you take that question hair and you compare it?
Yes, this is the similar view that I would see. So it has two separate hairs on microscope slides, and that is what it looks like. It's like a split screen TV.
Going to page 16. Now, as you do that comparison then, what conclusions can be reached?
After the comparison is conducted, there are three possible conclusions that can be reached. The first pictured here is an exclusion, and this is where the question hair is microscopically dissimilar to the known hair sample. And accordingly, based on the known hair sample, the source of the known sample cannot be included as a possible source of the question hair.
All right. Does the FBI use specific terms of art? And when I ask that question, you use the term exclusion. So if there's an exclusion, does that mean that they are not similar to one another?
Yes, that's correct. There was differences that were observed during the comparison.
And during the comparison, if the characteristics are similar, then what would be more descriptive for that?
Well, if you could
Go to our
proceed to the
next
next
And actually,
slide.
what I'll do is I'm going to jump a page. I'm going to go to page 18 so that we can discuss that concept.
This conclusion is referred to as an inclusion, and this is where the question hair is microscopically consistent with the hairs in the known hair sample. Accordingly, based on the known hair sample, the source of the known sample can be included as a possible source of the question hair.
Okay.
And microscopic hair comparisons are meaningful due to the variation in macroscopic and microscopic characteristics between individuals. However, comparison of the microscopic characteristics in hairs does not constitute a basis for personal identification. and the number of individuals who can be included as a possible source of a specific hair is unknown. So I can't say that hair came from that person to the exclusion of all others using microscopic hair comparison microscopy.
Let me use DNA analysis as an example. Is DNA something that's unique to each of us as individuals?
A DNA expert would be better to answer that question.
Certainly. But I mean, is that a good example to say, like with DNA, you're looking at a DNA strand and then you can compare it to an unknown DNA strand and make an identification, whereas here you can just say that there are similarities?
That is correct. We cannot say for certain that that hair came from that person to the exclusion of all others.
Okay.
And that's why I go on by saying the inclusion of an individual as a possible source of the question hair by the comparison of microscopic characteristics should be evaluated in conjunction with the conclusion of the DNA analysis. So if there is if a conclusion of inclusion is reached, it is followed up with DNA analysis.
Can you define two terms on this portion of your PowerPoint? You talked about variations in macroscopic and microscopic characteristics. Give us an example of what would be a macroscopic characteristic.
A macroscopic characteristic is something that you can see under low magnification or with the unaided eye. So you can see, say, if you can look around the courtroom, you can see different people have different color, hair, different texture, straight, curly, blonde, red, brown. So those are more of the macroscopic characteristics.
And the microscopic characteristics, are those the characteristics that we discussed in one of your earlier slides as far as the characteristics of a particular hair?
Yes, that is correct. So the microscopic characteristics such as pigment granules, for example, the arrangement of pigment, something that you have to use a microscope to examine.
Are there times then that you cannot either make a determination about an inclusion or an exclusion?
Yes, the final conclusion option is an inconclusive, and this states that no conclusion can be reached because of the question hair exhibits both similarities and differences to the known sample, or also because the hair is of limited value for microscopic comparisons.
All right, now on page 19 of your PowerPoint, can you explain to us what you are talking about when you talk about blind verifications?
So blind verifications, when you have a conclusion of an inclusion, all inclusions are examined by a second qualified hair examiner. The second examiner independently examines and compares the question and the known hairs. And then after that, following the blind verification, a hair is submitted for the appropriate DNA analysis. So other hairs also may be submitted for DNA analysis at the discretion of the examiner.
What factors come into play when you're making a determination as to whether or not you are going to submit things for DNA analysis? You know, beyond the issue of making a determination of inclusion, what other factors would you look at as to whether or not you might submit hairs for DNA analysis?
There are many potential factors in cold cases where there was never a known sample to begin with. Sometimes that is requested for hairs to go to DNA.
Okay, going to page 20 of your PowerPoint. Now, are we switching our discussion from hairs to fibers?
Yes,
Okay.
The next section is discussing fiber evidence, and I want to start by defining what a fiber is. A fiber is a natural or manufactured material that is the basic element of a textile. So pictured here on the left-hand side, they're individual fibers which comprise yarns. Pictured in the middle here, yarns are knit or woven together in some way to make a textile fabric, and this fabric is an example of a shirt.
All right, and then textile, are we talking about manufactured goods? For example, shirts, let's say some type of throws, things of that nature.
Yes,
Okay.
shirts, blankets, pants, things of that nature.
Page 21 of the PowerPoint. How do you do the fiber examinations?
The way fiber examinations are conducted can be described in a series of steps. The first step being processing of evidence, which I discussed with hairs. So we could undergo the same procedure. The next step is identification of fibers, and followed by the comparison microscopy. And again, all of this I'm going to go briefly in detail in the next set of slides. It's more of a
Absolutely.
summary.
Absolutely.
But the comparison microscopy is conducted. If there are no differences using comparison microscopy, the next step is polarized light microscopy. If there are no differences at this step, we move on to fluorescence microscopy. If there are no differences with fluorescence microscopy, we move on to microspectrophotometry, followed by, if there are no differences at the microspectrophotometry step, the next step is a Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. Sorry.
The next step is the.
And then if you could spell the word as you state that last step to help out our court reporter.
I'm sorry, where did you leave off?
The next step after.
The next step after fluorescence microscopy is microspectrophotometry, otherwise known as MSP. So microspectrophotometry is spelled MICROSPECTROmetry, followed by Fourier, FOURIER, transform infrared spectroscopy, SPECTROSCOPY.
Now, just given your description of the various steps that you go through, do we understand it correctly that if you do not reach a positive conclusion at one step, then you would not complete the further steps?
Correct. If there's a difference at any point, then I will stop the examinations.
Page 22, explain how you go through the process of identifying fibers.
So this is done using a high magnification transmitted light microscope and it is used to examine the prepared microscope slides to identify if it's a hair or if it's a fiber. If it's a fiber, then if it's natural or manufactured.
Page 23, explain to us then the fiber comparison microscopy.
A comparison microscope is used for a direct side-by-side microscopic comparison, which is also the same microscope that we use for microscopic hair comparisons that I described earlier.
Okay, and then I'm going to slow down so that we can be kind to our court reporter because the words that we are using is a little bit more complicated to type, I would imagine. All right, now, if you could then explain to
Ms.
us.
Cunningham, actually,
Should we
this
take a
might be a
break?
good time for our mid-morning break.
That
We're
sounds
a
good.
little past 10:30, and it looks like you're moving to another topic. So we'll be in adjournment for approximately 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Shit, I think everybody need a break after that. All right, y'all gonna fast forward. This testimony right here may be a little tedious, but yeah. All right, let me fast forward through the morning break, and then she's gonna come back. I appreciate y'all joining me today. I really do. Thank y'all so much. Y'all be sure to hit the like button if you don't mind, so I can get these
Filters,
videos,
one below the stage.
so I can get these lives in the algorithm. Thank y'all so much. All right, here we go.
And one above the stage. And this allows for the examination of, in comparison of the fiber's optical properties, which allow us to determine the optical properties allows for the identification of the generic polymer type of the fiber, such as nylon, rayon, or polyester, for example.
And is that what you mean when you talk about optical properties for various types of fibers?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So say, for example, if I buy a shirt and it's 100% polyester versus buying another shirt that might be 60% rayon, and 40% polyester, would that be the difference in optical properties for various textiles?
I would expect those fibers, different polymer types, to have different optical properties.
Going to page 25 of the PowerPoint, could you please explain to us then
at the polarized light microscopy step. The next step is fluorescence microscopy, and this is where fibers are illuminated with various wavelengths of light to determine whether
for photographic images in this particular exhibit?
Yes, these are photos of, or examples of how a certain fiber looks illuminated with different wavelengths of light
Okay,
using the fluorescence microscope attachment.
and working from left to right, is there more intensity in terms of what we see with the fluorescence in the right photograph as compared to the left photograph?
On the right-hand side, you can see this is an example of the fiber is bright and orange, for example, where the left-hand side, there's barely, if at all, any fluorescence.
All right, now, if we move on to the next stage and spell this for our court reporter before we discuss it, and let's move slowly through that.
Entry spelled MICROSCTROPHOTOMETRY.
What does this entail?
This is an instrumental means of color comparison. So this is done using a MSP, and the question and known spectra that are collected are compared to each other. The term used for the data on this instrument.
And then do we have an example of that in a photograph just to the right on this particular portion of your PowerPoint?
Yes, this is an example of a question.
Looking at that photograph, in that example, does it show that they bear similarities, or are there differences in what we're seeing?
This one looks like it is similar to one another. However, to make that final conclusion, I would like to actually see it, but yeah.
Absolutely. And then going to page 27.
If there are no differences with MSP, the next step with manufactured fibers is Fourier, F-O-U-R-I-E-R, transform, T-R-A-N-S-F-O-R-M, infrared, I-N-F-R-E-R-E-D, spectroscopy, S-P-E-C-T-R-O-S-C-O-P-Y.
Let's use the acronym of FTIR.
Yes.
What is that?
So FTIR is an instrumental method that uses an infrared beam of light to pass through the fiber sample to identify the polymer type and the subtype. For example, if the fiber is nylon, we could also determine with FTIR what type of nylon that fiber is. And then the question and the known spectra for FTIR are also compared to each other.
Okay, and then just to the left, on this particular page of your PowerPoint, the lower photograph, does that again give us a similar indication of how that spectra is compared?
Yes, this is an example of what we'd see.
Going to page 28. And then when you've gone through all of those steps, what conclusions can be reached?
There are three possible fiber comparison conclusions. The first one is an exclusion, and this is if a difference is observed, it can be concluded the question fiber is dissimilar to the known fiber sample and accordingly is not consistent with originating. Is an inclusion, which is that if the question fiber exhibits the same microscopic characteristics and optical properties as the known sample, it can be concluded that the fiber is consistent with originating from the known sample or from another source comprised of fibers that exhibit the same microscopic characteristics and optical properties.
And then our final conclusion?
The final conclusion listed here is inconclusive, and this is where no conclusion can be reached to determine whether or not the question fibers are consistent with originating from the known sample due to insufficient microscopic characteristics or optical properties.
And then where you do make a determination of a fiber conclusion, what is it that needs to happen if you do make a inclusive finding?
A fiber inclusion is not a means of positive identification, and the number of possible sources for a specific fiber is unknown. However, due to the variability in the manufacturing, dyeing, consumer use, and weathering of fibers within a textile, one would not expect to encounter a fiber at random that exhibits the same microscopic characteristics and optical properties as a particular source. So fibers can differ as to the type, color, shape, size, microscopic features, and optical properties. These are characteristics that may associate fibers with a group of items, but never to a single item to the exclusion of all others. However, even fibers with many similar properties may be excluded as originating from that same source using the identified analytical methods.
Okay, thank you. And then just to end your PowerPoint, our final page very simply consists of what?
This is just the ending slide saying that it was created for the FBI Laboratory Division Trace Evidence Unit and the Hair and Fiber Group.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ms. Otterstatter, are you familiar with an investigation that was conducted by the Davenport Police Department involving a missing child identified as Breasia Terrell with a subject of interest by the name of Henry Dinkins?
Yes, I am.
How are you familiar with that investigation?
I received items of evidence for examination purposes.
Okay. And then with respect to the items of evidence that you received, did you prepare a laboratory report setting forth the findings of any type of trace analysis that you did of hair and fibers?
Yes, I did.
All right. Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm showing counsel, or well, give me a moment here. May the record reflect that I'm showing counsel what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 45 for purposes of identification. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 45 for purposes of identification. I want you to look at that report and tell me if you recognize that report.
Yes, I do. I recognize it by the laboratory markings and my signature block.
How is this document captioned at the top?
The title of the document is Laboratory Report.
Okay. And then does it identify who the special agent was that was responsible for directing items of evidence to the laboratory for analysis?
Yes, it does.
Who is that individual?
That's James McMillan, Special Agent out of the Omaha Field Office.
Does it give us a date for when this laboratory report was generated?
Yes,
What was the date that this lab report was generated?
August 5th, 2020.
Now, for any type of investigation opened by a law enforcement agency, does each law enforcement agency assign an investigative number to that investigation?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, who issues or develops a FBI case identification number.
Okay, and does this particular document include the case identification number that was assigned to the investigation of Breasia Terrell?
Yes, it does.
Could you read that into our record?
It is OM-3290265.
And would you agree with me that that number is going to be different than the investigative report number that the Davenport Police Department would assign to any records that they're generating?
I would assume so.
All right. And then if there are submissions of items of evidence by the FBI to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, does the laboratory generate its own report or laboratory number?
Yes, it does. The FBI laboratory generates its own laboratory number.
For this particular investigation, what was the laboratory report number that was assigned?
Well, it's not necessarily a laboratory report number, but it's an FBI laboratory number, a case
that's
number.
fine. Yeah, absolutely.
And that is 2020-014448, is the FBI laboratory number.
When there are a series of submissions to the laboratory and a series of requests made, for example, requests being made of the DNA section, requests being made of the latent print section, requests being made, for example, of the trace section, recognizing that there will be a number of reports that are going to be generated, then does each analyst's laboratory report have an additional number that will be attached to that lab number to identify which report it is in the series of total reports generated?
We don't have laboratory report numbers, but I think what you're referring to is the case record number, which is listed here, which is an additional number onto the FBI laboratory number.
Absolutely.
And that number is a different submission comes in and it's assigned to a different discipline.
Okay.
For example, here is 2020-01448, which is the FBI laboratory number, and -3 is the specific case record for this submission specifically for the trace evidence unit.
Okay. Does this set forth then the items of evidence that you would have received and would have conducted an analysis of?
Yes,
Okay. Does it also set forth your findings?
yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit number 45.
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 45 will be admitted.
All right. Ms. Onestatter, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do this. Your Honor, may we publish this?
Excuse me?
May we publish this exhibit?
You may.
All right. I think what we're going to do, first of all, is let's go through and let's identify the various items that came into the laboratory. Now, before we do that, I want to have a discussion so that when the court has an opportunity to go through and review this laboratory report number, the court has some understanding of where items of evidence came from.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. We're dealing with items of evidence were recovered from. For any item that came into the laboratory, is there an item number that's assigned to it?
Yes.
Okay. I'll have you show me where that appears when we publish the exhibit. Then will there be a description of that item of evidence?
Yes.
Okay. And then beyond that, in parentheses, will there be identifiers for that item of exhibit?
Yes, there will be.
Okay. And then we'll talk about that. Now, let me take that an additional step. In the course, and if you don't know the answer to this, that's okay. I understand, because I'll cover that through another witness. But in the course of any investigation, are there evidence logs that are generated by each law enforcement agency when an item of evidence is seized and logged into their evidence system and stored?
I am assuming so, but I can't speak for what they do.
That's okay.
But in general, when we receive items of evidence, they will have a contributing agency item number, but the FBI laboratory will assign its own number, a laboratory number as well.
All right. That being said, let's walk through State's Exhibit 45, and then let's discuss what we have. Now, this is just going to be very simple.
Okay.
On our first page, what are our first four item numbers?
Do you want me to just list them off, or
Yes.
the description? Okay. Item 11, item 12, item 13, and item 14.
Is that the lab item number that was assigned?
Yes, those are the FBI laboratory evidence designators.
All right. Now, that being said, in items 11, 12, 13, and 14, is there a description so we know exactly the locations where those items came from?
Yes.
Okay. Item 11, describe it.
Item 11 is a piece of fabric from left shoulder area on front passenger seat of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
I want you to speak to the area where there is a parentheses. We see a number there that would include lettering as well. That first number, can you explain to us what that is?
That is 1B13, which is the FBI field office designator for the item.
And then by contrast, staying in keeping with this discussion, go down to item 27 in that area where we've got the parenthesis after the descriptor. Do we also see an additional entry beyond the FBI's number that they've assigned?
Yes, it says DPD item number 163.
Okay. And what's your understanding that DPD stands for?
Davenport Police Department.
All right. So with that entry, would that help us to go to look at evidence logs to determine locations where items were seized if we don't have a real exact description as we walk through these items and we don't know, and we won't know where they came from?
I would assume so. I haven't seen such logs, but.
Okay. All right. Item 12. Give us a description for that.
Item 12 is a piece of fabric from middle rear seat of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
13.
Piece of cushion from middle rear seat of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
14.
Rag from driver's console of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
All right. Now let's go through items 14 through 19. Actually, item 20. Are those coming from a specific location as well?
Yes.
Okay. Start at item 14. What is that?
Item 14 is the rag from driver's console of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
Item 15.
Item 15 is the shirt from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
Item 16.
Item 16 is shorts from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
Item 17.
Item 17 is a sandal from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
Item 18.
Item 18 is a sandal from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
Item 19.
Item 19 is a hatchet from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
Item 19-1.
Item 19-1 is the blade cover from item 19.
And would that be the blade cover for the hatchet from the trunk?
Yes.
And then item 20.
Item 20 are vacuum sweepings from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala.
Can you give some explanation of what this means? When the evidence recovery team goes out and processes scenes such as vehicles, do they ever use vacuums as a means of collecting potential trace evidence?
Yes, usually it's a vacuum with a special vacuum filter attachment.
Okay, and then so as we look at the descriptor for item 20, is that essentially what would have happened in the trunk when the evidence recovery team was processing the trunk of that Chevy Impala?
Yes.
All right, let me move this exhibit up so that we continue this discussion. Okay, what are our last two item numbers on state's exhibit number 45?
Item 27, which is a piece of mattress from 274. And item 28, piece of mattress from 2744 East 53rd Street to number 8.
Okay, as we look at all of these descriptors, would you agree with me?
Yes.
All right, now let's go to. Okay. I'd like for you to walk us through item 29 through item 34.
Item 29 is a piece of mattress from 2744 East 53rd Street, number 8. Item 30 is a piece of mattress from 2744 East 53rd Street, number 8. Item 31, piece of mattress from item 32, piece of mattress from 2744 East 53rd Street, number 8. Item 33, piece of mattress from 2744 East 53rd Street, number 8. And item 34, piece of mattress from 2744 East 53rd Street, number 8.
Okay, now let's look at the grouping item 35 through 38. Identify each of those items.
Item 35 is described as a shirt. Item 36, bra. Item 37, underwear. Item 38, washcloth.
Okay. When you were looking at these items, had you received any information about children's clothing having been returned to the mother that were contained within a bag of clothing?
I did receive information that they were all in a plastic bag.
Okay. And is this something that was subject to DNA analysis by our FBI analyst, Tiffany Smith?
You know, off the top of my head, I cannot remember.
That's all right. But are your item numbers going to be the same as her item numbers?
Yes.
And then so therefore, if she gives us a description where these 4 items came from, then would that location information apply to our item 35, 36, 37, and 38?
Yes.
Okay, now let's continue through the list and let me move it up just a bit. All right, picking up at our next item, item 45.
Item 40, padding in room D of mobile home, license plate number ENJ181. Item 46, debris from under foam padding in room D of mobile home, license plate number ENJ181. Item 47, machete from on top of microwave at 743 Schmidt Road. Item 48, machete. Item 48-1, sheath with item 48, which was the machete.
Okay, and then so 48 and 48-1, are those related to one another?
Yes.
Okay, and then contextually, are they aligned with our next item, number 49? So that gives us an item 49.
Street number 8.
Okay, I'll ask this question. If you don't know the answer to it, that's fine. Were you aware of a machete that had a sheath that was recovered under a mattress in the bedroom at 2744 East 53rd Street, apartment number 8?
Not off the top of my head. I didn't exactly know the exact location. That
That's all right, because then I'll have Detective Obert speak to that to fill in the gap there. All right, now let's go to our next series of items.
Item 53, shirt.
Okay. And I want to speak to that. Is there any location information there?
There's not listed, no.
But then let's go over to an item number. What is that item number in the parentheses? So we've got the FBI number, but then for our item number that we would associate with the Davenport Police Department, what item number does that give us?
That's is listed as item number 26.
Okay, and so then therefore, would that be information that we would need to collect from one of our detectives out of their evidence log to explain the location of that item?
Yes, you could.
Okay, now let's go to our next series of items.
Item 53 is a shirt from Henry Dinkins.
I'm going to stop you there. And so if there was a shirt that Mr. Dinkins had been wearing and law enforcement collected that from his person, does that comport with that description?
I would assume so, yes.
All right, take us through our next two items.
Item 55 is listed as a shirt from the north bedroom closet.
Is there an item number listed in parentheses that would be associated with the Davenport Police Department?
That is item number 24.
Okay, was this an item that was also submitted for DNA analysis with Tiffany Smith?
Yes.
And then did you discover that actually the entry on your report for the location of this item was in error?
That the description of the shirt being from the north bedroom closet was how it was submitted.
Mhm.
However, in discussions or communication logs from Tiffany Smith, the DNA examiner in the FBI laboratory, as well as a discussion with the Special Agent McMillan, it was clarified that that was not from the north bedroom closet, that it was from the plastic bag with the other items of evidence that I discussed earlier, the item 35 shirt, item 36 bra, item 37 underwear, and item 38 washcloth.
And so that would be the bag that had the children's clothing in it?
That was the plastic bag.
Yes, okay. You know what I'm going to do, Your Honor, may I make that correction on this exhibit?
Of course, you did, so
Do you have any objection?
I don't.
You may make that correction. So it comports with the record.
And then hold on, let me turn that around. What is our final exhibit number?
Item 56, shirt from bed.
Okay. And then again, do we have a specific location as to what bed?
No.
Do we have a Davenport police report? Appropriate location?
Yes, it's listed as item number 16.
Okay. Did that include all of the items of evidence that were submitted for your analysis?
For my analysis for this particular case record, for this particular submission.
Right. Now, I'm going to jump ahead. Did you actually
Sir, where the hell you come from? Sir.
It's called From Out the Bed.
Y'all slept till noon? My God, today.
Well, I went to sleep kind of late. Pretty much. I'd say I went to sleep around the 9 o'clock mark when I gave her her medicine.
Who went to sleep at 9 o'clock? She did?
Me.
It was 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I had like dozed off for 15 minutes when I got off the live, and then I was just up.
Yeah, I went back to the room and came back and you was gone. I was like, dang.
No, she's not. She said she's not gonna be your friend because you're not listening. No, she's not listening because she's
Don't
talking.
lie on me. Don't lie on me. Don't tell that baby to lie on me.
No, she heard you not listening to her.
What you say? I didn't hear her say anything.
What you say, Gracie?
I wanted to talk. I want to say hello.
Okay, say hello.
Hello, person. Oh, he done dropped off. She might have knocked his ass out. He'll be back.
Receive a second submission where you did further analysis?
Yes,
Will that be set forth in a separate laboratory report?
it is.
All right. So then, at this point in time, Your Honor, I had introduced State's Exhibit number 45, had I?
You pushed the wrong button. You don't have to touch it. Just talk.
Hello? Hello, Trump.
Hey, Tracy.
What you doing?
I'm just chilling.
She's doing the live.
Daddy.
You a stinky baby.
You just stupid boy.
I'm a stinky, stupid boy.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
not
you
nice.
are in a, I think you are in an abusive relationship with your dog.
And she just called me a crybaby. Whatever.
Shut up. Do it.
Somebody to get you in line. That's a shame. That is a shame.
Not?
Yes.
Okay, all right. At this point in time, then, let's just walk through this. What were you asked to look?
I was requested to perform hair and fiber examinations and comparisons.
Fibers that were present.
There were some items were examined and they were all received in the trace evidence unit. Hairs and fibers were all collected, they were processed. Not all examinations were conducted at this time. There were no known hair fiber samples at this time the report was submitted.
Okay, and then when you said that there was no hair, no known hair samples, who would that have involved? Were there any submitted for Mr. Dinkins?
That came in at a later time.
Okay, and then as of the dates report, had they located the body of Breasia Terrell?
No.
Okay, did you summer and early fall of 2020?
I'm sorry, can we go back to your original question about fiber and hair exams conducted? I was talking about the hair exams, but I did conduct fiber comparisons on this particular submission.
Okay, all
I just
right.
want to clarify that.
No, and thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So you didn't do any analysis for hairs because you had no known samples. Would that be fair to say?
I did the examination portion on some of that, but not the comparison.
Okay. When you did the examination for the presence of hairs, did you find hairs on any of these items that were submitted?
I did.
What items would that have been?
Can I refer to my results?
Absolutely. Your Honor, may the witness refer to her results?
Just so the record's clear, I want the witness to tell
Exhibit, I'm sorry, was it number 45?
State's Exhibit number 45.
I refer to in my report that I have up here.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Item you're looking for, or just the results in general?
Yeah, just the results in general related to locating any potential hair samples.
In the results of examination, third paragraph down starting, one head hair exhibiting African ancestral characteristics was recovered from item 38, which was the washcloth. This hair is suitable for meaningful microscopic comparison purposes and has been preserved on a glass microscope slide. If further microscopic comparisons are requested, please resubmit this evidence along with a known hair sample or samples.
Okay. Now, just to go back, item number 38, is that the washcloth that would have been in the children's bag of clothing?
Yes.
Okay. If through the course of the investigation, it was known that Breasia Terrell had been in the apartment at 2744 East apartment number 8, and she had used that washcloth, then would
Not think because she was already associated to that washcloth without any further things happening.
Absolutely. And let's just take that a step further. With the child being identified as being present in that apartment, or the child even being identified as being present in a maroon Chevy Impala or the black Camaro, with the child's presence there, if there were hairs of that child that were recovered from either location, does it advance the cause because we have her established presence in those locations?
That is correct. So as I stated before, when I talk about the reason why they're conducted is to establish a possible association between two people or a person and object. But if may not be meaningful or needed.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, now let's go ahead and let's continue with your findings then.
Human body hairs and hair fragments not suitable for meaningful microscopic comparison purposes. Of 2007 Chevrolet Impala, and item 38, wash, which is the washcloth. These hairs have been preserved on glass microscope slides.
Okay, but they weren't suitable for meaning microscopic comparison.
They were not.
Okay, and so therefore, submitting any known hair samples for either the child or Henry Dinkins would be of no consequence. Would that be fair to say, as it relates to these items?
Correct.
Okay, what are your next findings?
One head hair was recovered from item 45, which was the debris from top of foam padding in room D of mobile home, license plate number ENJ181. And one head hair was also recovered from item 46, which is described as debris from under foam padding of room D of mobile home, license plate number.
Sure, comparison.
My report that these hairs are suitable for meaningful microscopic comparison purposes and have been preserved on glass microscope slides.
Okay, all right. And then would that require the submission of a known hair sample?
Yes.
All right. What were your next findings relative to hairs?
So moving on, no human hairs were found on item 47, which is the machete from on top of microwave at 743 Schmidt Road.
Okay, now I want to talk about that. We're simply addressing the issue that there were no human hairs found on that machete that was recovered on the top of the microwave. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are there going to be different findings, though, related to that machete as we go further through your report when we talk about the fiber analysis?
Yes, the fiber analysis results are listed separately.
Okay, all right. And then what else was noted when you were doing your analysis related to items of evidence for hairs or fibers? Oh, no, at this point, are we turning to the fiber analysis?
Well, there's one more results for the hairs. Moving on down, no hairs or fibers were found on items 19, which was the hatchet. Hatchet from trunk of 2007 Chevrolet Impala. Item 19, which was the blade cover from the item 19 hatchet. The 48, which was the machete. And item 48-1, which was the sheath from the item 48 machete.
Okay, let's go back and let's make sure that we understand this. So the hatchet that was taken from the trunk of the maroon Chevy Impala, no hairs on that, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the hatchet that was taken from the trunk of the maroon Chevy Impala, no hairs on that.
Correct.
But when we talk about item 48 and 48-1, a machete and a sheath with item 48, there was nothing there as well.
There were no hairs or fibers found.
And this machete is distinctly different from the machete that was found on top of the microwave at 743 Schmidt Road.
It was a completely different item.
All right. And then so item 48 and 48-1 will require some clarification from a detective who testifies so that we understand the location of where that machete and that sheath came from. Would you agree with me there?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go to your findings related to any types of fibers.
So starting with the first paragraph of the results of examination section of my report, textile fibers of various types and colors were recovered from item 47, which was the machete from on top of the microwave at 743 Schmidt Road. These fibers were compared to known fibers comprising the item 14 rag from driver's console of 2007 Chevrolet Impala, and item 38, which was the washcloth.
Okay, and item 38 would be the washcloth in that bag of children's clothing.
Yes.
Okay.
The fibers recovered from item 47 properties to the fibers comprise items 14 and 38. And accordingly, these fibers are not consistent with originating from the source of item 14 or 38.
Okay, now to be clear, there was no question that there were fibers on that machete on top of the microwave in the RV.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
There is no question that there were fibers on that machete that was recovered from the top of the microwave in the RV, correct?
There were fibers.
All right. In order for there to be fibers then on that machete, what would have to happen?
The machete would have to be in contact with fibers.
All right. Now, when all of these items were submitted to you, for example, the washcloth from the children's bag of clothing, or the other exhibits, let me see, what was that again? Oh, and that would have been the rag from the driver's console of the 2007 Chevrolet Impala. Did you have any information that from an investigative standpoint that either of these were connected to that machete in any way?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So the washcloth from the children's bag of clothing, and then that rag that was taken out of the console of the Impala, did you understand whether or not they had any relation?
They were not from the same scene, but I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, and that's a very interesting point that you make. They were not from the same scene, but you still analyzed those to see if the fibers from those two items were consistent with what you saw in the machete. Would that be
Yes.
fair to say? And there were definitely fibers on that machete, but you don't know what the source of those fibers were. Would that be fair to say?
That is correct.
Okay. And then from there, what else did you conclude as a result of your analysis when you were going through and looking for fibers?
Textile fibers of various types and colors were recovered from items 14, which is the rag from the driver's console of the 2007 Chevrolet Impala, and 38, which is the washcloth. These fibers have been preserved on glass microscope slides.
Okay. All right. And then beyond that, any additional findings related to fibers?
If you move on down to my report results section, no textile fibers were found on item 45, which were the debris from the top of foam padding in room D of mobile home license plate number ENJ181. And no textile fibers were found on item 46, which is the debris from under foam padding in room D of mobile home license plate number ENJ181.
Okay. Can you tell us about items 45 and 46? Were those examined to determine whether or not they were in fact some type of hair?
The specimen, the debris that was collected from items 45 and 46 were examined to determine if it's a hair or if it's a fiber. Let's see, I'm sorry, 40. So as I testified earlier, there was a head hair recovered from item 45 and from 46.
Okay. All right. And were those meaningful for microscopic comparisons?
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, related to the washcloth associated with the children's clothing, was there any type of hair found characteristics of that hair?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. And for the washcloth that was located with the children's clothing, was there any hair on that item that you could identify an ancestral characteristic?
The item 38 washcloth, as I testified earlier, one head hair exhibiting African ancestral characteristics was recovered from the item 38 washcloth.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Otterstatter, relative to your findings, the finding that the state would focus on would be the findings related to the machete from the top of the microwave that did have fibers on it. And there's no question about that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, and again, I'm going to go back. The machete from the top of the microwave, that was found in that RV at 743 Schmidt Road, that definitely had fibers on it.
Yes,
Okay.
it had fibers on the machete.
Let me throw this question out, and I don't know if you can answer this, but when you were doing the examination of the machete that was found from the top of the microwave at 743 Schmidt Road, and looking at those fibers, could you offer an opinion as to what those fibers would have been?
Are you asking for I didn't do any further comparisons, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, no, but when we talked about characteristics of fibers, do various fibers have different characteristics?
They do. I would, to answer your question, I may be able to answer your question, but I need to refer to my case notes for that.
Do you have your case notes with you?
I do have a copy of my case notes if you don't, if I am approved to examine them. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So in my case notes dated July 29th, 2020, from the item 47 machete from on top of the microwave, I have listed that there were textile fibers of various types and colors, including there were numerous 100 plus white cotton type fibers clumped together.
What would that be associated with then?
I don't know where they came from.
All right, and then let me be just a little bit more specific. When we consider paper towels versus considering some type of cloth wrap, come from a product like a paper towel versus a cloth rag?
The numerous 100 plus white cotton fibers would look different than paper fibers, but it is possible that they came from some fabric. I just don't know what that would be.
Okay, so clearly a fabric.
Yeah, these are fibers that would be, comprised of fabric.
Okay, and if a child had testified that that machete was wiped off with some type of cloth, is that consistent with your findings?
And also, as far as the white cotton fibers, I mean, it could be any type of fabric or textile, not just a cloth.
Okay, sure, absolutely. All right, thank you. Now, let me direct your attention to State's Exhibit number 46. Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm showing counsel to mark the State's Exhibit 46. May I approach?
You may.
I'm handing you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 46. Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 46?
I do.
What is State's Exhibit 46?
It's my laboratory report dated September 14th, 2020, and I recognize it by the laboratory number and my signature block.
Would this have been the second report that you generated by virtue of additional submissions that were made?
Yes.
Okay, and does it set forth your findings?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit number 46.
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 46 will be admitted.
Okay. In this particular case, may I publish this, Your Honor?
You may.
In this particular case, were there some additional submissions of evidence that came in?
Yes.
Okay.
There
And
were.
then for purposes of our record, starting at Exhibit number 70 and moving down, or item number 70 and moving down, tell us what the additional submissions were.
There are item 70 is the comb submitted as known sample from Briasia Terrell.
And I'm going just to stop you there. At the time that this comb came in, was it believed that hair samples in that comb could have potentially been Briasia Terrell's?
Yes, this was again submitted as well. A known hair sample is the ideal known hair sample directly from the scalp, but this was her known sample was not available, so they submitted an alternate known in the form of a comb. Alternate known.
All right. And so to be sure, with a comb in a family home with multiple family members, is there always the possibility that various family members could have used that comb?
That is a potential.
All right. What are our next items of evidence?
Item 71, head hair sample from Henry Earl Dinkins. Item 72, pubic hair sample from Henry Earl Dinkins. Item 73, head hair sample from Andrea Culberson. Item 75, vacuum sweepings from driver's seat and floor in 2012 Chevrolet Camaro. Item 76, vacuum sweepings from front passenger seat and floor in 2012 Chevrolet Camaro. Item 77, vacuum sweepings from rear seats and floor in 2012 Chevrolet Camaro. Item 78, vacuum sweepings from trunk in 2012 Chevrolet Camaro. And item 79, shirt from trunk in 2012 Chevrolet Camaro.
To walk through this, since Breasia was known to have been in the Chevrolet Camaro, were those vacuum sweepings then determined to be of any import for purposes of analysis?
Can you repeat your question?
Yes, since Breasia Terrell had been identified as having been in the Chevrolet Camaro, was there a need to go through and process any of the vacuum sweepings from that vehicle to associate her with that vehicle?
If she was already associated to that vehicle as a passenger, then looking for hair evidence would not necessarily be probative.
Okay. All right. Now that you've got known hair samples for Henry Dinkins, a subject by the name of Andrea Culberson, and then a potential sample that could have been Breasia Terrell's, describe what you did in comparing those items to our item 14, the rag from the driver's console, item 20, vacuum sweepings from the trunk of the Chevy Impala, item 4, 45 and 46, and that would be the debris from the top of the foam padding in the RV and under the foam padding.
So the first to evaluate the item 70, which was the comb submitted as a known sample from Breasia Terrell,
Okay.
to make sure that I had a suitable known hair sample for comparison purposes.
Was it suitable?
It was not suitable for comparison purposes. During my examination of, all the debris from the comb was prepared on glass microscope slides, and I examined those microscope slides with that debris. And in my report, it states textile fibers, a wig type fiber, non-human animal hair exhibiting microscopic characteristics consistent with dog, numerous hair fragments exhibiting African ancestral characteristics not suitable for meaningful microscopic comparison purposes, and a few head hairs or portions of head hairs, some artificially treated, were recovered from item. Hairs are not suitable to be used as an alternate known head hair sample and were not used for further microscopic comparison purposes.
Okay. And did that essentially conclude what you analyzed when you received the second submission?
Correct.
All right. So with that being said, there would have been no way to compare that to the debris on the foam padding in the mobile home. Would that be fair to say?
Not using that particular alternate known.
Okay. And then finally, Ms. Otterstatter, were you aware of how much time passed before they found the body or the skeletal remains of Breasia Terrell?
I am aware that there was some time passed. I'm not aware. I wasn't aware. Well, I don't think her remains were found when I issued my report.
Absolutely. At any rate, with the development of additional information over the course of the investigation and various witnesses that were identified by law enforcement, does the nature of evidence that comes in change the need for certain analysis to be conducted?
Yes, that can happen over the course of an investigation.
Thank you.
Mr. Freeze, I think that we will take our afternoon break at this time. I apologize, you will not be able to do your cross-examination at this time, but you will take that up after our break. We'll reconvene at 1:30. Thank you.
Okay, y'all, let me see where I'm at on time. Ooh, excuse me. On time, Lord Jesus, be with me. That'll determine if we listen to the examination. Let's see. So, all right, so she comes back up at,
As I understand it, please
4:30
correct me if
mark. And let me see if his is long. Oh, let me see, because y'all still in here. Most of you anyway, so let me see. We are at I started at what, 10:30? Oh, we're at 2 hours. Okay, I can go to 3 hours. So let's listen to the cross-examination, y'all. Let's start the cross-examination. Thank y'all for being here. Y'all make sure y'all hit the like button. Thank y'all so much.
I'm wrong. We're not able to connect Henry Dinkins to any items submitted.
All right, I don't want to miss anything, and I tend to fast forward too much. Let me see it.
Your Honor, the state had concluded its direct examination.
All right, here we go.
Mr. Freeze?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's Ms. Otterstetter, is that right?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, ma'am, just to kind of summarize what I believe your conclusions have been in this case, you examined a number of items that were sent to you and then performed testing on some items that you were able to test and possibly compare.
That man shirt big
on,
as
I
hell.
believe, 2 separate occasions, right?
Yes.
And those conclusions, as I understand them, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Who's talking about offended? Who shirt big?
Dinkins,
Oh.
tell Tony the Cowboys suck, by the way.
You know what? I will.
You know, they got the late game, I think. He gonna let you go live tonight?
She fell out. Oh, there you go. There you go.
That didn't fall
All
off.
right, y'all. Here we go.
We're not able to connect Henry Dinkins to any items submitted to you at the lab, right?
I did not do a comparison to his known hair sample. So that's correct.
Okay. Was there any trace evidence that connected any of the items you examined to Breasia Terrell? The questions were asked of you about the Camaro. You recall that line of questioning? And Ms. Terrell being in the Camaro and Mr. Dinkins being in the Camaro and it not being so important to test those items?
Yes, I remember that.
And as I understand that line of questioning, that was because if we know that those two were in the Camaro, trace evidence wouldn't be so important. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
Did you know that Breasia Terrell and Henry Dinkins had both been in the Camaro when you were asked to test these items?
I believe so.
Because that begs a question with me then, is why were these items even submitted to you for testing?
Which items are you talking about?
Well, anything from the Camaro.
I believe they were more interested to look for evidence in the trunk of the Camaro. But that is it.
Was any trace evidence suitable for examination found in the trunk of the Camaro by you?
I did not examine items from the trunk because I started out with examining the item 70 alternate known hair sample from Breasia Terrell because that was not suitable for comparison purposes. I did not proceed any further with any other exams.
Okay. Item 78 on State's Exhibit 46 are vacuum sweepings from the trunk in the 2012 Camaro. Were those ever tested?
No, because I did not have a suitable known hair sample from Breasia Terrell.
Okay, I understand now. After Breasia Terrell's remains were found, did you understand that we had hair at that point?
No, I did not. I was not contacted when I did not receive any evidence after Breasia Terrell's remains were found.
But after she was found, and let's assume there was hair found with the remains, it is possible then to take that hair and compare it to the evidence that was submitted to you, right?
If there was hairs that were recovered from Breasia Terrell's remains, yes, that is possible that I could examine those and potentially use that as an alternate known or a known hair sample from Breasia Terrell.
So no one ever submitted any hair samples following the discovery of her remains to you for testing?
No.
And your testimony is those could have possibly been used to compare against, let's say, item trying to remember which one it was. You did have an item of hair that was taken from the mobile home, correct? I believe it was item 45. Strike that item 38 in exhibit 45.
Item 38 was the washcloth, And there was one head hair exhibiting African ancestral characteristics recovered from the item 38 washcloth. So yes, I could have used.
Excuse me, that's the one that we determined was Breasia Terrell's because it was mixed in that plastic bag, right?
I did not determine that hair was Breasia Terrell's.
Okay. You also found one head hair from item 46, debris under foam padding in room D of mobile home. Do you see that?
Yes.
Right.
And that
Right.
item was recovered from item 46 and were suitable for microscopic examination, right?
Correct.
So we have an item of hair from the mobile home, just so I'm clear, right?
Yes,
And that item is preserved for microscopic examination to this day, right?
correct.
And if we have Breasia Terrell's remains that have hair, to this day, we could possibly compare those two to see if Breasia Terrell was in that mobile home.
If there are hairs on her remains that are suitable for comparison purposes, yes, that can be conducted.
And no one asked you to do that, did they?
No, sir.
And you and I conducted a deposition about a month ago, right?
Yes,
We did that over the computer, Microsoft Teams or Zoom or something like that, right?
yes.
And I asked you that question then, didn't I?
I don't remember that specific question,
You recall us having a discussion about the same line of questioning about Breasia Terrell's hair?
perhaps.
In the last 30 days, has anyone asked you to compare that hair sample from item 45 to Breasia Terrell's hair that was recovered with her remains?
No,
Now, there was a line of questioning about the Camaro, and if we knew that Breasia was in the Camaro, that was also applied to the Impala. Recall that?
yes.
Did anyone tell you that conclusively we knew that Breasia Terrell was in that Impala?
I believe so, that she was.
Let's assume for argument's sake that we don't know she was in that Impala, okay? There are items of trace evidence here, such as item 11, item 12, item 13 on Stacy's Exhibit 45, item 20, which are vacuum sweepings, which could have trace evidence that could be compared to the hair that was found with Breasia Terrell's remains if they wanted to be compared, right?
Let's see. So you're asking if there's hairs on 11, 12, 13, and 20?
I guess maybe I got ahead of myself. Items 11, 12, and 13, first of all, were there any trace evidence found on those?
There was debris that was collected from those items of evidence, but at that time I had no known hair samples, so I did not conduct an examination on those.
So my question now is, assuming that we don't know Ms. Terrell was in that Impala, and we know that 11, 12, and 13 are items that come from that Impala, and knowing now that we have hair from her remains that could be used for comparison, could that be done?
Yes, everything is collected and preserved, and if there are hairs suitable for comparison purposes from her remains, that could be conducted.
Were you ever asked to do that?
No,
Is it fair for me to say that there's no trace evidence in that Impala that places Breasia Terrell in that Impala?
well, it would be inaccurate because we just don't know.
Okay, the question then becomes, is it fair for me to say we don't know from the evidence and the testing that you have done that Breasia Terrell was in that Impala?
Correct. There's no comparison that was conducted.
And is it fair for me to say that you weren't asked to conduct any comparisons? Right?
You mean after her remains are found?
At any point?
There was a request. However, I didn't have a known hair sample suitable for comparison purposes to do so at that time. And there was no additional samples submitted.
Under the microscope, you're able to tell if a fabric has been bleached, right?
I cannot examine fabric underneath a microscope and say that is bleached. No, I can examine it to see if it appears faded, but I can't say that fabric was bleached.
It seems to be a subtle distinction. What would make a fabric become faded?
Well, there could be exposure to sun, for example, solar bleaching is one way. Items get bleached. Bleached is another.
Ma'am, are you asked to conduct any analysis or trace evidence on a 9mm SCCY pistol in this case?
I don't believe so, no.
Were you asked to conduct any trace evidence
No.
of a revolver
Cross-
and about a baseball bat? Did you analyze any baseball bat for trace evidence?
No.
There's been some testimony about a pocket knife or a small folding hunting knife. I don't see that in your report. Do you recall testing a pocket knife or folding knife for trace evidence?
No, that was not submitted.
Were you asked to test a small kitchen knife for trace evidence?
If it's not in my report, I didn't examine it.
Who made the decision to submit these items to you for analysis?
That I'm not exactly sure. The contributor was Special Agent James McMillan of the Omaha Field Office with FBI.
You had hair samples from Mr. Dinkins, did you not?
Yes,
Head hair and pubic hair?
yes.
And you're able to compare those against anything that was submitted to you?
Which items are you specifically asking about?
Any item?
That was not compared because many of the items were from places that he was known to have been.
Okay. That's all I have.
Ms. Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm showing counsel what's been marked as States Exhibits 9-9 and 9-10. I'll introduce these two matters, but I just want to show what to do. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Ms. Otterstatter, I'm handing you what's been marked as States Exhibits 9-9 and 9-10. I'm really just using this for purposes of foundation, and I would represent that we'll introduce this to a later witness. As you look at these exhibits, do you recognize what's depicted?
Well, this appears to be a large knife or machete.
Okay, and was that the large knife or machete that you noted that there were trace fibers on?
What, can you tell me what the FBI item number is?
Absolutely, I will. And let's go to your report, going to item number 47, which would be your item 47, and then the FBI item number being 1B54.
Okay.
Does that appear to be item 47 that you would have received and then analyzed for trace evidence consisting of fibers?
That item 47 was received in the trace evidence unit. I personally was not the one that examined it. We have our physical scientists that do all of the collection, and I am the one that received the microscope slides for examination purposes.
Okay, let's just go ahead and lay some foundation. So then when these items of evidence come to your unit, is there essentially a two-tier process to this, or a two-step process?
There is the processing or collection of hairs and fibers from the item of evidence, and then the hairs and fibers any hairs and fibers collected from the evidence are prepared on glass microscope slides for examination purposes. That could be like step one, for example. And then once those hairs and fibers collected are mounted on microscope slides, then I receive those slides and examine it using the methods I testified earlier to.
All right, let's approach that question in a different way. When you looked at States Exhibit 9-9 and 9-10, did that appear to be a large machete?
Yes.
Just based on what you could see with the naked eye, could you see some type of trace evidence consistent with fibers on that machete?
I'm going to object at this point. She's talking about a photograph that's not been admitted into evidence yet. That
Your
is
Honor,
appropriate.
Your Honor, it's simply laying foundation for testimony that will be authored through Detective Patrick Siebert. And this is really more illustrative of the point that I'm trying to make, if anything.
Then that's the time to ask this question is after Siebert testifies and this item is in evidence.
Your Honor,
Approach,
this witness
please.
has to get on an airplane, and so,
Approach, please.
sure.
Uh-oh, we got action. That defense attorney, boy, I tell you, we got action. Thanks so much for letting me listen in. Miss Shirley, thank you for listening in. Have a blessed day, Miss Shirley. We'll see you later. Hebrews, we got action. Thank you, Miss Shirley. Child, the judge came down off the bench, ain't it? Mm. Thank you, Hebrews. Wonder who's gonna win this one. I don't eat a piece of a pigtail. Don't tell nobody. It's so good. Oh my God. Just a little piece. Baby, they is into it, honey. Yes, eat books. I cooking some cabbage. And it got pigtails in it. So I took a piece of the pigtail out before I put the cabbage in. Let this lady do her job. I know that's right, Melissa. I know that's right, girl. Damn, they still talking.
Hey, when did truth drop? I did not know this. You stopped it. Who playing with? Yeah, I don't know where she left off at. I ain't even know she dropped. I just noticed it got quiet. It might be late. Go Titans. Okay, I put it in the garbage when I get. No.
No. You have to do it while I hate you.
Stop showing out.
I have to.
No, you don't. Sema. I don't know how she knows that song. She just busted out singing it like 2 minutes ago.
Sing it to the people.
No.
Sing it.
No.
I hate you.
Okay.
Sing it.
No.
Well, I'll hate you.
Okay.
Simmer, who got a key for the business? Simmer. I think it's better.
Yeah, you sing it better.
Simmer, who got a key for the business?
So what have y'all learned today? Y'all know I came in late, so I missed y'all. Let me see if I can see y'all comments. Hold on. What have y'all learned today? Let's see. Chat comments. There we go. Truth. I'll be right back, y'all. I was about to tell you, let this lady do her job. Stop dragging us out. Pigtail. Hi, Miss Shirley. Hey, E-Books, don't laugh at her. That's why she be showing out. Because y'all be laughing. Oh, no, block punt. No. Yeah, Cowboys suck though. They really do. Tony, the Cowboys gonna lose. They suck. You Cowboy fans in the chat, they suck. What is Odell Beckham? I'm watching like 4 games at once. The Titans are pissing me off. The Ravens got a good game going on. I forgot Odell Beckham Jr. plays for them. You 49ers fans, y'all look like y'all cutting up. Score like 17 points already. Of course, she's singing Sema, who got the keys to my beam? I think it's Beanie Man, ain't it?
Oh, you
Who am I?
1, 2, buckle my shoe.
I don't know that one. Oh, somebody gave you hearts.
1, 2, 3.
I asked her that. She said her auntie sings it. I don't know.
Hey!
No, I don't listen to it. Thank y'all for the hearts. I'm trying to. Has Odell Beckham Jr. done anything? Y'all don't. Ain't no football fans in the chat. No. They just got Joe Burrow back, so that makes sense. He hadn't had a chance to practice. But it was 3-0 last time I checked on that Bengals game. So that's still early.
BB Bumby. 1, 2. Buckle my shoes.
I like the BB Bumblebee.
Okay, I love BB Bumby too. BB Bumblebee.
No, they watching football.
BB Bumby song. BB Bumby.
Is it Bumblebee song?
BB Bumblebee.
You watch football with me? No? What's your favorite team?
Nothing.
Yep. What's your favorite team?
Nothing.
What's your favorite team?
No.
What's your favorite team?
You two kids.
You two kids. That's not a team. Don't make me pull out your baby pictures. I will.
I want you too.
I dressed you up. What's your favorite team?
No, nothing.
What's your favorite team?
Nothing.
Oh, you ain't acting right. But there ain't nobody's favorite team the Lions. The Lions ain't even the Lions' favorite team. Stop it, ma'am.
Now shut up.
You don't even like
Yeah.
the Lions. Yeah, don't do that.
Shut up.
Don't do that.
Oh,
to
shut
the
up.
Lions.
Shut up. Nobody likes
I wonder
Lions.
who plays
Shut up.
tonight. Got to be the
Shut
Cowboys.
up.
They're not on now. Grayson, stop. You're showing out now. So you making fun of me now? This child is just like me. Yeah, y'all went 1-16 a year before, a couple times too, so that happens. Like, who cares? It's 16 more games there. Win a few more, then holler at me. See, this why I don't be going live. She be cutting up. She gonna do me like that. Nope. What the hell is true? Did you still rebooting your computer? Your CPU? Let's move on. Shut up. You the one brought up the damn lines. Like nobody ever says this their favorite team. I ain't see nobody wearing no Lions hat, jersey, or nothing when I was up yonder. Y'all don't take pride in y'all team. But you go to Milwaukee, you'll see Green Bay stuff everywhere. Them niggas don't play about their football team up there because they ain't got nothing else in the books. Crayons? You break all your crayons into 40 pieces, ma'am. There's no such thing as unbreakable crayons.
Come on, Dad.
No.
You made blue crayons. Blue. Blue crayon.
Give me some money.
No, I don't have money.
Give me some money. I don't know either. Your tablet is extremely loud. Because you what? You rude. No, I'm not.
I'll flush with water.
Why you gonna splash me with water for what?
But you're not going to give me no more crayon. Well,
And so, because you can't get crayons, you're gonna splash me?
yeah, with water. And hands.
Just that makes no sense.
No flush having your smoke.
What?
No flush having your smoke.
Whatever. Whatever. This little child she just is running amok. And y'all laughing. Darn 4-year-old. What are you doing? Oh. So, babies, are y'all enjoying Baby Pity Hour? No. She be doing the most. I wonder where she gets it from. I really do. Oh, bro, let's see. What was I saying? Oh, I was talking about dude's shirt being big.
Oh Lord.
Whoever
Okay.
was in charge of his wardrobe need their ass whooped too. Like
He's in prison.
he looks stanky. I know. Tim came out in turtlenecks and stuff. Melly had on suits. Booster had on suits. He just got on a big stanky shirt.
Well, maybe he ain't had no damn suit.
It like he probably ain't even got no pants on.
Hey, in court, Trey, of course he got pants on now. Come on. Wait a minute. Let's see. Oh gosh. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm bad. I'm trying to see what this Oh, it went all the way back to the beginning. Oh hell.
No, this would cells. Body fluids contain many.
Where did we end? Hold on. Did we? Let's see.
Have used.
Excuse me, but that's one that we determined was Briasia terrellus because it was mixed in that plastic bag, right?
I did not determine that hair was Briasia terrellus.
Yeah. Let's get to the right.
You also found one head hair.
That's what they was fighting.
Those fibers
Okay, here we go.
be something that can be seen with the naked eye,
I do.
Potentially,
okay?
maybe
And,
not. Maybe not.
okay.
That's
but-
why we use low magnification microscopes when examining things such as machetes.
But there is the possibility that there could be fibers that are obvious to the receive a baseball bat in, is that correct?
Correct.
You indicated that you didn't receive a pocket knife in, is that correct?
That's correct.
You indicated you did not receive a kitchen knife,
Correct.
all right? And so then at the point of collection of those items, do you know whether or not officers examined them to see if there was anything on those objects that would merit submission to the laboratory? Can you speak to that issue at all?
I can't speak to that issue.
Okay. Would you agree with me that in the course of an investigation, when officers are collecting items of evidence, they consider the circumstances and their observations of those items to determine whether or not it is an item that they believe should be submitted for analysis?
I can't speak to their thought process.
Okay.
But yes, I know that when they collect something, they decide at that point whether or not to send it to the laboratory.
Okay. Now, let me take that just a step further. You had been asked if you had received a .38 special revolver for purposes of analysis. Was there a .38 special revolver?
No.
Okay. If an item, a physical object, had been recovered from a body of water, would that seem to be a likely object to submit for any type of trace evidence analysis?
We have received items like that before.
It is that they note during the course of their contact with that object.
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, with respect to the SCCY 9mm semi-automatic pistol, again,
No.
okay. And then I will speak to this. Do you even know the location of where that was recovered from?
I have no knowledge of that item.
So therefore, we have to consider the knowledge of the investigators at the time that they found these objects, which would form the basis of decisions made to the FBI laboratory. Would that be fair to say?
I'm not sure I'm one to answer that question, to be honest.
That's okay. That's all right. Now, another thing that I want to talk about, just for purposes of our record, when counsel referred to items 11, 12, and 13 on your lab report, was that the sections of fabric taken from the maroon Chevy Impala?
11, 12, and 13?
Yes.
Those are pieces of fabric from the different parts of the Impala, yes.
Okay. There was a question about whether or not, or what kind of, how bleach would affect fabric. And what was your answer to that?
I testified that I cannot examine a piece of fabric and say definitively that is bleached.
Okay. Now, just as a matter of common experience, though, if bleach is applied to fabric or upholstery, what does it tend to do to the color of the fabric or upholstery?
Well, bleach tends to fade or make the colors lighter,
Okay.
depending on what type of bleach you use.
And then you had mentioned the topic of solar fading. Give us an idea of what you mean by solar fading.
Solar fading is when fabric is exposed. So if we all have purchased new clothing, so it's nice and bright, new,
Mhm.
and then solar fading can happen when the fabric or fibers have been exposed to the sun over a period of time, and it looks faded or lighter. It changes the color somewhat.
Let's take that and let's apply that concept to a vehicle. Now, if you have a vehicle that doesn't have any tint to the windows, would it be fair to say that that fabric is going to be exposed to sunlight coming in through the windows of the vehicle?
Yes, that's fair to say.
And
Depending on the sun and the location of how the vehicle is parked and all those factors.
okay, and then relative to the topic of solar fading then, if there has been solar fading to the upholstery, would you expect that fading to be consistent across a broad area of the fabric versus like maybe small square patches in a section of fabric?
I would expect that the solar fading would be where the sun is exposing, or where the fabric's exposed to the sun.
Okay, thank you so much. I have no further questions. Oh, no, I do have one other question. Did you make a determination about the ancestral characteristics of the hair that would have been collected from the foam padding in the mobile home? And I would direct you to item 45 and 46 in State's Exhibit number 45. And then that would also be true in State's Exhibit number 46.
Did you say item 45 and 46?
Yes.
I didn't include that in my report of examination. Let's see. I can. I am referring to my notes, if that's okay.
Correct.
For item 45 and 46. Item 45, the head hair has a little bit more information about it if you'd like me to read my notes.
Could you please?
It says one head hair, approximately 4 1/4 inches in length, broken at root end, appears or artificially treated, appears dyed dark black, rendering hair nearly opaque. Hair is coarse with patchy pigment. Cuticle appears dyed, potentially stripped, and perhaps a wig type hair.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Freeze?
Ma'am, item 47 on State's Exhibit 45, the machete from the top of the microwave. Did you physically lay eyes on that object?
I did not process that item, no.
Okay, so any analysis you did was simply looking at a slide with any items of trace evidence that was provided to you, right?
Correct.
So you're relying on someone else's collection of that item.
Yes.
Very well, thank you. Nothing further.
The state has no further questions.
Anybody second?
The defense has no defense. This is so weird. All right, let's see who's coming next, y'all. We're gonna be through in a minute. The defense has no defense.
Your Honor, the state calls FBI analyst Tiffany Smith to the stand.
Let me see. Starting now. Hour 1. Let's see. Hour 1. Oh, she's gonna go for an hour and a half, so we're gonna end it here. We're gonna start here on tomorrow, y'all. She's gonna be up for a while. The FBI, excuse me, y'all. The FBI was really, really involved in this case. So she's another FBI agent. She's gonna come up. She's gonna be at least an hour and a half, and then there's another guy coming up, and then we'll be through with this. This video is actually 7 hours and 8 minutes. We got through 5 hours, so I think that's pretty good. Not today, but to yesterday. My big group. I'm getting ready to end it.
What you cook today?
Cabbage.
It's football Sunday.
Cabbage roast with carrots and potatoes.
We don't believe you. Upload a picture.
It's not done yet.
Oh, whatever. Why you going back live at 7? Like, go live at 3.
I'm stupid. I have things to do, Trey.
Yeah, you have to go live. I want to hear this drunken laugh. He started throwing shade already. This is finna get good.
And listen. listen. So when we got off live, which you got off before I could say bye, but I ain't gonna talk about that. But anyway, so you get off live. What was I doing? I think I was going to get ready to do a video or something. I was sitting up still on my phone anyway. Oh, okay, phone, you been out in them streets. Okay, girl, that's okay. So listen, Trey. So the notification came up on my phone. Chico Lord is live. Ooh, child. Let me tell y'all something. Y'all need to come back tonight. He did Chico Lord did 2 lives. He went live one time, and then he came back. And then what's gonna really get y'all is Melissa did a live while Chico was live, and I got that, and she deleted that off her page.
Wait, so in other words, it's going down tonight.
Oh man, oh man, the shade, the drunkenness, the drunken shade, y'all don't want to miss this one, I'm telling you. I ain't going back live in no 3-track. I gotta finish my dinner, and I got stuff to do. So it might even be 8, but I'm gonna try my best for it to be 7 since it's Sunday.
So much for Team Chico. They ain't even get 2 shows.
No. And okay, I ain't giving no spoiler alerts. I'm not giving no spoiler alerts. You're just gonna have to be back here at set or be over there at the TV. I forgot I had put y'all. I couldn't wait to put that schedule live up. Especially when I seen that she had deleted her live. And I'm telling you, I ain't go to bed till 5 o'clock in the morning.
Flex the lead, stank alone there. That she didn't take it enough abuse. Leave her alone. Just let her die off slowly.
Them folks was on live till after 4 o'clock in the morning is what I'm trying to tell you, honey.
Who was live that long?
They was on live till after 4 o'clock this morning. I'm telling you.
Who, the Chico and the Melissa? They were full of the Duce, wasn't it? After having drunken lives across the street from each other.
I will give y'all the end. Chico Lord fell asleep and started snoring. He fell asleep with his clock. Them motherfuckers ain't even bathed. Okay? He fell asleep on the sofa snoring, and she like, child, y'all gotta come. Y'all gotta see it. Y'all gotta see it. They live like they homeless. I'm sorry. Anywho, y'all get out of here. I gotta go get through what I gotta do before it's time for me to come back. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all supporting this live. I honestly do. Shout out to the True Silvers and the State Gang members that were here. If you haven't hit the like button, please hit it on the way out. If you're catching a replay, please hit the like button. Okay. And yeah, I'll see y'all later on 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, hopefully. It won't be no later than 8, though, I promise, because I know on Sundays people have to get them go to work the next day. It's a oh Lord Chico child. They probably did hear my live. And baby, I got their lives too. And the thing about it is, I don't know if Chico Lord's is still up. Actually, I think one of them may be still up, but not both. But I know for facts that Melissa took hers down. She did, but I got it. Anywho, I'm gonna see y'all later. I love y'all. Y'all enjoy y'all Sunday, huh? Y'all enjoy y'all family like I am. Gonna have to do some din with my family. Y'all enjoy your family. Enjoy your day. Y'all be safe, be blessed, never stress. I'll see y'all later on tonight. And for those that support this channel, I'll see y'all in the morning. We will continue with this FBI agent. Okay. Thank y'all. Shout out to my moderators. Love y'all. See y'all later. Access my regular. I'm talking things for better. Oh, things for better. Oh, way better. Access my regular. I'm talking things for better. Oh, It's my regular, I'm talking things for better. Oh, things for better. Oh, way better. It's my regular, I'm talking things for better. Oh, things for my regular.